The world of the bold and the beautiful has always treated weddings not as endings, but as crucibles, moments where love is tested by history, expectation, and the quiet weight of what people carry with them into the future. For Carter Walton and Daphne, the days leading up to their wedding are initially filled with a rare sense of lightness. After years of emotional detours, disappointments, and compromises, they finally stand on the edge of a shared beginning that feels earned rather than rushed. Their joy is not loud or naive. It is the steady confidence of two people who believe they have survived enough to deserve happiness. Surrounded by friends who have witnessed their journey, they allow themselves to imagine a life defined less by struggle and more by chosen peace. Yet even as plans take shape, there is an unspoken tension beneath Daphne's smiles. Her excitement is genuine, but it is threaded with restraint, as though she is bracing for something she has not yet named. Carter notices this in small ways, in the moments when Daphne hesitates before making decisions, in the careful way she avoids certain conversations about family. He assumes, as many do, that weddings simply awaken old nerves, that anxiety is a natural companion to joy. What he does not yet understand is that Daphne is not afraid of marriage. She is afraid of inheritance, of the invisible obligations passed down through blood and memory. That fear takes form when Isolde arrives. Her entrance is not dramatic in volume, but in presence. She carries herself with a rigid dignity that feels almost anachronistic, as though she has stepped out of another century and into a world she does not fully recognize. Her clothing, her posture, even the cadence of her movements suggest a life governed by rules that no longer hold sway in modern Los Angeles. The room quiets when she introduces herself as Daphne's aunt, and the surprise is immediate, not only because no one expected her, but because Daphne's reaction is unmistakably guarded. The warmth Daphne shows to friends does not extend easily to Isolde, and that distance speaks volumes. When Daphne reluctantly makes the introduction, she offers only fragments of explanation. She alludes to complicated family traditions, to a past she rarely discusses, and to relationships shaped more by duty than affection. Carter listens, trying to reconcile the woman he loves with the shadows she seems to carry. Isolde, meanwhile, wastes no time asserting herself. Her observations are precise, her judgments unfiltered. She studies the wedding plans not as suggestions, but as errors in need of correction. The ceremony, she insists, lacks the gravity appropriate to such a union. The attire is too modern, the structure too informal, the symbolism insufficiently reverent. What begins as discomfort quickly escalates into disruption. Isolde introduces a series of demands, specific garments, archaic rituals, and symbolic gestures rooted in a family history Daphne has spent years trying to escape. Each request chips away at the couple's carefully constructed vision, replacing their shared dream with something unfamiliar and oppressive. Carter responds at first with patience. He understands the instinct to honor elders, to respect lineage, and to make allowances for cultural difference. Yet as Isolde's interference grows more intrusive, patience gives way to frustration. This is not guidance, it is control, exercised without regard for the lives being shaped. Daphne finds herself trapped between two forces she cannot easily reconcile. On one side is the future she wants with Carter, a future defined by choice, equality, and mutual respect. On the other is the weight of a family legacy that has always demanded compliance. Isolde embodies that legacy, not merely as an individual, but as a living reminder of the consequences Daphne was taught to fear. The pressure is not abstract. It is rooted in years of conditioning, in stories of women who defied tradition and paid for it with exile or regret. Daphne's reluctance is not weakness. It is survival instinct honed over a lifetime. The conflict reaches its breaking point when Isolde insists on a wedding ceremony conducted according to an ancient rite, one that strips the couple of agency and reframes their union as a continuation of lineage rather than a partnership of equals. The demand is presented not as a preference, but as an obligation. In that moment, the celebration becomes a battleground. Carter can no longer remain neutral. He voices his opposition, not in anger, but in clarity. He refuses to allow their marriage to begin as an act of submission. His resistance is not a rejection of Daphne's past, but a defense of their shared future. Faced with this confrontation, Daphne finally reveals the truth she has long avoided. She speaks of her family's history, of traditions enforced through fear and silence, of women whose lives were shaped by expectations they never consented to. Isolde was not merely an aunt. She was an enforcer of those customs, a guardian of a system that valued continuity over happiness. Daphne's compliance in the past was not belief, but resignation. She had learned that resistance came at too high a cost. Sharing this history is both liberating and terrifying, as it exposes wounds she thought had healed. Carter's response is not to diminish that past, but to acknowledge it fully. He understands now that honoring Daphne means more than supporting her joy. It means standing with her against the forces that once constrained her. Together, they search for a compromise that respects heritage without surrendering identity. They choose to incorporate select elements of tradition, symbols reinterpreted, rituals adapted, transforming them from instruments of control into expressions of meaning. It is not an easy negotiation. Every concession is weighed carefully, every decision a balance between respect and autonomy. When the wedding day arrives, it is not flawless. There are moments of tension, glances exchanged across the room that hint at unresolved disagreement. Yet there is also authenticity. The ceremony reflects who Carter and Daphne are, not who others believe they should be. Their vows, their choices, their visible unity speak louder than any prescribed ritual. The love they share has been tested not by temptation or betrayal, but by history itself, and it has emerged more deliberate, more grounded. Isolde watches from the periphery, her expression unreadable. She does not disrupt the ceremony, nor does she withdraw entirely. When the celebration concludes, she offers a measured acceptance, acknowledging the changes without fully endorsing them. Her final look, a lingering gaze that suggests both concession and warning, serves as a reminder that tradition rarely releases its grip completely. It adapts, it waits, it endures. Daphne recognizes this truth, but she also recognizes something new, that she is no longer bound to face it alone. In the end, the wedding is not a resolution, but a beginning shaped by honesty rather than illusion. Carter and Daphne step into their future aware that love does not erase the past, but it can redefine its power. Their union stands as a testament to the courage it takes to choose one's own path, even when history insists otherwise. And in that choice, imperfect and hard-won, they find a strength that promises to endure long after the echoes of tradition fade. In the aftermath of the wedding, the fragile equilibrium Carter and Daphne fought so hard to achieve begins to fracture, almost immediately. What was meant to be a compromise slowly reveals itself as a postponement of deeper conflict. The ceremony may have ended without public scandal, but the emotional residue lingers, settling into their shared life like fine dust that cannot be wiped away. Love remains present, but it is no longer effortless. It requires constant negotiation, constant reassurance, and constant vigilance against forces neither of them fully controls. For Carter, the realization is subtle but persistent: the battle did not end at the altar. For Daphne, the truth is more painful: she never truly escaped the past she believed she had redefined. Isolde's influence does not retreat with grace. Though she no longer openly dictates, her presence remains heavy, expressed through carefully chosen words, veiled expectations, and reminders of obligations that transcend personal happiness. Daphne begins to feel the old pressure resurfacing, not as explicit commands, but as guilt, as inherited fear, as the quiet suggestion that deviation carries consequences yet to be revealed. The traditions she thought she had reshaped now feel like unfinished business, and the tension between honoring her lineage and protecting her autonomy becomes unbearable. Carter notices the shift in her energy long before she acknowledges it herself. Daphne grows distant, more cautious, less willing to assert herself. The woman who once fought to claim her own future now hesitates, as though bracing for punishment that has not yet arrived. Carter's frustration deepens, not because he doubts Daphne's love, but because he feels increasingly powerless within it. He begins to sense that he is no longer standing beside her in defiance of the past, but watching her slowly retreat back into it. His attempts to offer reassurance are met with gratitude rather than relief. Where there was once partnership, there is now imbalance. Daphne is torn inward, fighting a battle Carter cannot fight for her, and that isolation begins to erode the intimacy they once shared. Love, Carter realizes, cannot survive indefinitely in a space where one person must constantly shrink to preserve harmony. The pressure intensifies when Isolde reasserts herself with subtle authority, framing her continued involvement not as interference, but as protection. She speaks of legacy, of responsibility, of the dangers of abandoning tradition too quickly. Daphne listens, conflicted and exhausted, aware that resistance will not only affect her, but ripple outward to family members who still live under Isolde's influence. The cost of defiance grows clearer by the day. Carter becomes, unintentionally, a symbol of rebellion, a reminder of choices Daphne made that now feel unsustainable within the world she never fully left behind. Arguments between Carter and Daphne become more frequent, though never loud. Their conflict is marked by restraint rather than fury, which only makes it more devastating. Carter questions how much of their life together is truly theirs, and how much is borrowed time, before tradition reclaims its hold. Daphne, unable to articulate the depth of her fear without sounding weak, grows defensive. She insists she is trying, yet her definition of trying becomes synonymous with enduring. Carter understands, then, that their visions of survival are no longer aligned. Where he believes love should expand possibility, Daphne has learned that survival often requires contraction. The breaking point arrives not with betrayal, but with resignation. Daphne finally admits what she has been avoiding, that she does not know how to live fully outside the framework she was raised within. The wedding compromise did not free her, it exposed how deeply rooted the expectations still are. She is exhausted by the constant tension, by the feeling that every choice she makes must be justified not only to Carter, but to generations of unspoken judgment. Loving Carter, she confesses, has become synonymous with living in opposition, and she no longer has the strength to sustain that fight. Carter's response is heartbreak tempered by clarity. He recognizes the truth in her words, even as they devastate him. He realizes that staying would require asking Daphne to become someone she is not ready, or perhaps not able, to be. The love between them has not disappeared, but it has become a source of pain rather than refuge. Carter understands that love, when it demands self-erasure, is no longer love, but sacrifice without end. The realization does not bring relief, only the quiet certainty that continuing would destroy them both. Their separation is not dramatic in spectacle, but it is devastating in consequence. It unfolds over measured conversations, shared silences, and the mutual acknowledgement that something essential has been lost. There is no villain, no singular moment of blame. Instead, there is grief for what could not be sustained and sorrow for a future that required too much compromise from too many directions. Carter leaves not in anger, but in mourning, for the life they imagined, for the partnership they almost achieved, and for the woman Daphne was when she believed escape was possible. In the weeks that follow, Daphne retreats further into the world Isolde represents, though not with triumph. Her compliance brings stability, but not peace. The traditions she submits to feel hollow without Carter's presence, stripped of the meaning she once hoped to reclaim. Isolde observes her niece with quiet satisfaction, aware that lineage has once again asserted itself. Yet even Isolde cannot fully erase the change Carter introduced. Daphne carries that fracture within her, a reminder that another life existed, if only briefly. Carter, meanwhile, emerges from the separation altered but resolute. The experience leaves him with a deeper understanding of the cost of compromise and the limits of love when identity is at stake. He does not regret loving Daphne, nor does he resent her inability to choose differently. What he mourns is the reality that love alone could not dismantle generations of fear. That knowledge hardens him, but it also clarifies him. He learns that partnership must be chosen daily, freely, and without coercion, by both people in equal measure. The breakup leaves scars that do not fade quickly. Daphne remains bound to a legacy she cannot yet escape, while Carter carries the weight of loving someone he could not save without losing himself. Their story does not end in hatred, but in unresolved sorrow, a reminder that not all love stories fail because of betrayal. Some fail because the world surrounding them refuses to loosen its grip. In the end, Carter and Daphne become casualties of a truth far older than either of them, that tradition, when left unchallenged, does not need force to win. It only needs time, patience, and the slow erosion of hope. And though their paths diverge in tension and grief, the love they shared leaves an imprint neither can erase, proof that even the most painful endings are born from something once deeply, undeniably real.